Everyone online says you need to scale with a course. And I say, sell the damn service. I'm Emylee Williams, award-winning consultant and productized offer expert since 2014. And I'm here to help you work less, make more, and stop custom building your burnout. Each week, we talk strategy, structure, and the real stories behind sustainable service businesses. You know, from service providers who like doing service work, who want to stay in service work, but also just make more money. If you're ready for all that yapping, then let's dive in. Hey. All right, we're going to talk about a little bit of a subtext conversation that is in alignment with goal setting. And I've outlined extensively my goal setting process, especially for the work that I did when I mapped out 2026 and I was looking at 2025. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, definitely go listen to it. It was a recent one. And I kind of walked you through the literal steps of what I did to actually get a foundation in reality when I was mapping out 2026. Sometimes I think we forget that no matter how long we've been in business, there is information that we can be using to plan. And we don't have to be pulling out numbers out of thin air or making stuff up or making it feel unrealistic. There should absolutely be reality that's being factored into what it is that you're doing, right? Well, I want to take this conversation a little bit into a little bit further, a little bit deeper. I've been having some chats with some SOS clients as I've been, onboarding the most recent round of folks who dove in November and digging into their current state of business and where they want to be. And I've been having the same conversation, a similar conversation over and over. And so that is my first green flag to take this conversation to the podcast, to the public space. And it's this concept of here's where I'm at, right? Here's how much money I'm making on a monthly basis. Here's how my various offers are performing. Here's the product pie, right? Of what percentage of each thing that I'm offering is bringing in. And you can do this either by each literal offer. Say you're a web designer and you have custom web design, template web design, SEO, strategy, copywriting, and hosting, right? So those are 5 different services. You could, branch them out into 5 different offers and look across your total revenue. What is the weight that each one of those offers is pulling, right? You could also look at this in categories. So my business, for example, I have only one offer for service providers, one offer for consulting, and then that money comes in a couple of different ways, lead sources, but also like affiliate partnerships and collaborations, right? So I want to see my product pie. If my revenue is 100%, what percentage of that is coming from consulting overall? What percentage of that is coming from service, sold out services or this brand, right? So if I have sold out services, but maybe I also had a lower priced offer or a membership or whatever, right? All of that would fit under the sold out services container. Okay. Any proposals that I send under the Creatives Catalyst side fits under that umbrella. So I want to see of my total revenue percentage of each thing, is coming in. That's the conversation we had when I was mapping out goals and planning. And I used the factual information that 2024 told me. Here's how much money you made in 2024. Here's how much of that came from services, consulting, done for you work, DIY, courses. It doesn't matter, right? All the things. Here's how the money came in. Okay. Conversation I want to have today is how do we use that information to make different decisions in our business? What I feel like isn't being had is one, a lot of people aren't mapping out and planning their next year or their business or their reality based on data at all. And maybe it's hard to get that data. Maybe it feels disorganized. Maybe you have all sorts of emotions around what that data means about you or about your business, and you haven't worked through that. I've been there, so I get it. But that's just the first obstacle in getting this information. But if you have the data, even if it's messy, even if you have to check, Airtable and QuickBooks and Stripe, whatever, right? Yes, let's get it all into one source of truth, but that's not the conversation I'm having today. Maybe you have checked all those sources and you've got it all organized and you're looking at it. But just because we have the data and just because we can see it doesn't mean we then know what decisions to make because of what that data is telling us, right? So I want to go over today a couple of scenarios, questions that I've been asking clients, that I've been asking myself when it comes to mapping out 2026. And this isn't just necessarily about finances and revenue. It's also about what do we want to do in our business? What do we want to spend our time on? And how do we want next year to go differently? How do we want it to go the same? Right. And the answer, the specifics to all of this are definitely unique to how aggressive you want to grow next year, how consistent you want to be, what you want more or less of. There's no wrong answer here, right? But you if you've been around for a while, if you've listened to this show, if you've listened to my other podcast that I have with Jessica Emylee, the Lazy Business Podcast, you can go find that on Spotify and Apple. If you've listened to that show at all, you know that I talk about there are just consequences to decisions. That is just reality. Those consequences are good, bad, and indifferent. They're all neutral. It doesn't matter. A good consequence to you might be a bad consequence to me because it's not something that I want to do or I would be willing to do or that I want to have or do to have, right? That is all relative. So we're removing the emotion out of that. But what I want you to start to introduce is this practice of playing a little bit of hypothetical scenarios and filling up your container of the next year and really checking with yourself, what are all of the roads that could lead me to a result that I'm proud of, that feels good, that I'm actively working toward? And do those things and do those results sound like something that I want, right? And if the answer is no, then we need to change it, right? It's that simple. Okay, so here's some of the conversations. I'll give you mine first, and then I'll go over some clients. So I was looking at 2025. And I was looking at my total, uh, product offer pie, right? My total revenue of broken down by categories, and I break mine down by consulting, sold out services, right? And so Creatives Catalyst, sold out services. So it's consulting versus done with you program, right? And then affiliates of anything, but it's affiliates for sold out services, right? Um, and then speaking, because I get paid to speak. Okay. So those are my 4 things. I could break them down into a lot more. I could break them down into affiliate income for softwares and tools. I could break it down to what I got paid to write for large publications. I'm sure there's other things, right? I am not actively pursuing those things in 2026, so I don't care. And they're so minuscule, right? Like what I got paid to write for large publications, I think totaled like less than $1,000 last year. And I know that it's not on my docket in order to grow for 2026. So I'm not bringing it to the forefront to monitor. Okay. It's being calculated in my calculations, but I'm not looking at it, I don't care. Right. So I'm looking at the things that I care about, the things that I'm working toward refining, doing more of, doing differently, doing less of, making better, right? Doesn't matter. And so ultimately, the high level things showed me that in 2025, my revenue was comprised of 70% consulting, 19% sold out services. Okay. So now we're already at 90%. Okay, what is my next biggest thing? And is it something that I care about pushing into for next year? The next biggest thing was a membership that I'm not bringing back, so I don't care about that, right? It gives me insights, but if I'm not focused on it for next year, I'm eliminating it from the conversation. The next biggest thing was a VIP day. I don't think I'm going to prioritize VIP days next year, so I'm not worried about it. The next biggest thing was speaking collabs at around 2% of my revenue. and then affiliates about 1% of my revenue. Okay. I am actively focused on consulting, lot services, affiliates, and speaking next year. So those are the things that I'm going to look at. So if I have 1% of my total revenue in 2025 being affiliates, and I say, okay, if I'm looking at growing from 2025 to 2026, and remember my growth rate from 2024 to 2025 was around 17%. If I want to do that again, just my decision, I could do 20%, I could do 50%, I could do 5%. It doesn't matter. None of those things mean anything. I just picked a number. And so I said, okay, in 2026, I want to grow by X percent. So well, I can't remember the exact, let's say it's 10%. So what is 10% more of the total revenue I made in 2025? All right, that's the number. And we talked about that in the other episode. But the deeper work now is saying, okay, if I'm looking at those top 4 things, consulting, sold out services, affiliates, and speaking, what do I want to do more or less of? Okay, so we start at the big 70% consulting and just under 20% for sold out services. I would like that not to flip flop, but I would like maybe 60 to 65% being consulting and 20 to 25%, inching up to 30 being SOS. Okay. So what does that leave me? Right? Okay. Well, I really want to focus on more affiliates next year. I do want to focus on speaking, but affiliates is a bigger priority for me. So if barely trying this year brought me 1% of my revenue from affiliates, and when I say barely trying, I mean the person asked me, I didn't even like reach out, and it was for one launch at the end of the year. Okay, if I actually gave that my time and attention, could I get that to 5%? Okay, so what could that look like intentionally throughout the year? What is 5% growth of that? Right? So once I start to map out and assign the pie, the responsibility of each of those categories that I want it to bring into my business, that's when I then double check the math of like, all right, if I want consulting to be 60, 65% of my total revenue, what is that if my revenue is increasing by 10%? What is the actual number? And then do it for sold out services and do it for affiliates. Okay, so I'll basically do the math. And 5% is laughable of an amount that small. And so what I'm actually going to do is look at what would it look like to double it, right? So 1361 times 2 is $2,722, right? That's still, but that's very doable. Okay. But just because I have that end number, I still need to actually have the the stair step that's required in order for me to reach that. Okay. So what I would literally do is look at my 1300-ish and where did that come from? What product or products did it come from? What was my commission rate? How many people did I refer? How did I get those sales? What did I do to make that result happen? And do I feel like doing that behavior again is realistic? If I did it more often, if I did it more intentionally, would I double my result? And if 1362 or whatever it was, how many actual affiliate sales was that? And what would it look like to get double the amount? What would be required for me to have in my audience, community, subscriber list, orbit, whatever, to double my results? And actually put numbers to the paper in order to figure out how that's going to happen. So I'm not looking at the exact numbers of this, so I'm just going to make up some things. 1362, I know that came from 3 or 4 different affiliate relationships. One of them was definitely the bigger front runner. So maybe I focus on the majority of my goal coming from that offer. Okay, well, I'm going to reach out to the founder of that thing and I'm going to say, hey, when are you launching this thing in 2026? Is there a way to be an evergreen partner for this thing? Can we go ahead and schedule some, JV workshops or collaborations and get that on the calendar and be intentional about it. And since I have the goal and I am focused on it, I can work on getting it on the calendar earlier in the year. So I can also see and kind of check it off the list before, halfway through the year, right? Wouldn't that feel really cool? And so I'm asking you to do that for every single chunk of what you want to focus on next year. So we'll do the same thing with my other containers. So we have consulting and we have sold out services, right? With consulting, it's at 70% of my revenue, and I want it to be closer to 60 or 65. What does that number actually mean? If I have that amount of revenue, pull less responsibility, but remember I'm wanting to grow by 10%, how does the math need to work then? And I just shuffle the numbers around. Am I seeing the 10% growth all from sold out services? Do I have wiggle room to work with less consulting clients if I'm raising my rates and restructuring my container? Maybe. Do I want to have more launches for SOS throughout the year so that I can have that one pull more of its weight? Maybe. These are all hypotheticals that are all routes to get me to the same goal. They provide the same result, but they require different things of me, right? If getting just more people in SOS feels like a really big ask, then that tells me information. That means I need to raise my rates in consulting and work with less people so I have more time to maybe build my audience for SOS so it feels easier to grow and get more people inside. Again, these are all just, if I did this, would it impact the thing that I say that I want? And does that action, behavior, result feel in alignment with how I want to run my business? So there's a couple SOS conversations I'm having that are very similar. One is with someone who has a full-time job. And so her web design business is there for extra income, extra revenue, to, give her an option outside of her day-to-day to have something else, right? But she's getting her financial needs met over here in her full-time job. So her revenue goals for her business aren't as high as mine or maybe yours because it's not her full-time job. But what that means is just because it's pulling less weight financially, it means it also needs to pull less weight time-wise, marketing-wise, lead-gen-wise, prospecting, vetting, delivery, onboarding, offboarding, and all of the other things behind the scenes because her time is way more limited than the average person. All right. So we used that as our container that we then pull in hypothetical scenarios because we have to start somewhere, right? Again, it's not always at revenue. This one was at time and her realistic capacity. How many hours per week do you actually have in order to work on this stuff, right? So based on that, we said, okay, can really only work with like 1.5 clients a month. 2 would be pushing it. And so 1.5 means you're onboarding and then starting work on one client, maybe wrapping up that client while you begin onboarding another client. That's kind of what 1.5 means. But you could also do it just on like, no, I literally only have capacity for one. Okay. I said, how much revenue per month do you want your business to bring in? She gave me a number. And I said, great. If you have the capacity to work with one client per month, that's how much you need to charge. If you think that you're going to get one client per month, 12 clients per year, if that's the amount of money you want to be making and you feel like you really are only going to have capacity to work with 6 people, then you need to double that rate. And we're not even taking it into account. Like she still needs to save for taxes and there is a little like software expense. She does run a really lean business, but typically you need to like, say you want to make 10K per month. You need to add, well, I'm not going to do the math, so it doesn't matter why I picked a number. You need to add 25% for taxes, depending on where you live, right? Be 25% for expenses and just extra things that you maybe want to account for, right? So you need to actually be making more than 5K per month if that's what you want to actually, or 10K per month if that's actually what you want to be paying yourself, right? And so she can ask herself, does it make sense? Do I feel comfortable, confident, excited about going after a client that can pay X amount of money because I only want to work with 6 people? So that means it's a higher end service, higher end client. If that makes me nervous, I don't want to charge that much. I don't want to have to create an experience that like matches that price point. Okay, we can lower the price, But then that means we're increasing the amount of people that you're working with. And does that feel realistic? You get to choose. There's always these conversations everywhere of like, you get to choose what kind of business you run. You get to choose what you price. You get to choose all these things. 100%, that is true. What I feel like isn't being had though, and being talked about and being thought about is, yeah, you get to choose. And are you choosing the thing that like actually works for you? Right? Like, don't just choose the thing because it seems sexy. And then in your head, it's like, okay, I only want to make an extra 5K per month. So I'll charge 5K and I'll land a client every month. Is it realistic for you to land a client every month? Do you actually have the capacity to onboard a new client every month? And if you need to be paying yourself 5K, you need to be charging more than 5K. So now we're not looking at just 5K. We're looking at more than that. Is that realistic? Just like take the extra step and dive a little deeper in your planning, in your thought process. Because what I'm so frustrated about seeing is time and time and time again, I'm chatting with someone who had the plan, they mapped it out, they spent the time, they worked toward the things, and they were still falling short with the goals that they set, right? Not like standards, but like the goals that they had set for themselves. I still don't know why it feels this chaotic. I don't know why I'm not making the money that I want to. I don't know why I'm spending so much time over here. Well, let's look at the data and look at what you believe to be true about what you need to do in order to get the result that you say that you want. And if that isn't feeling in alignment, then all that shit is never going to feel good, right? I have another client who, drastically different, opposite end of the spectrum, right, is definitely in scale mode. And she runs a business where she offers one-on-one done for you services. She has a membership and digital products that are more like done with you, right? Some DIY, some done with you. They're all performing really well. And her visibility of her brand has also grown, though her affiliate income is increasing. And so when we looked at the product pie, it was like 30, 30, 30, 16. Like it was whatever the math is, right? 30, 30, 30, 10. And it was bonkers about how equal of a weight the three main categories of her business were bringing in. And it was like, well, no wonder your attention feels so divided because everything is moving. Like, I know you can't all see the video, but like the graph goes up a tiny amount across all three channels. And there's not one that's outperforming the other, which is fine, except because they were all three getting the same amount of attention. They're all three performing really well. That's just gonna be how it keeps being in your business unless you do something different. And so what we talked about was, okay, do you need one-on-one done for you services to be pulling this same weight? You've already proven that you are successful at selling your membership and your other offers. If you were brand new, I wouldn't suggest pulling back on services. But could services bring 15% instead of 30%? And what could that free up for you in the other side of your business that does let you up, that is growing, that does have opportunity if we just pull back a little bit on services? She still wants to stay in it. And I love that. You know, I support that message, but we don't need to be all in, right? In the same level that you have been. And so, okay, what's the math then? If it's 30% now, what does 20% look like? And if you're growing, if you're wanting to grow in 2026, what is 20% of your new revenue goal? And that is the dollar amount for services to come in, right? Does that feel realistic? Does it still feel like that's a lot of clients to work with? Okay, if we decrease the amount of clients, say it with me, what needs to happen if we're decreasing the amount of clients? We need to increase the price. Exactly right. Good job. Okay, but it's these conversations that I'm asking you to dive deeper in with yourself. Get a biz bestie, go over it. Get some paper and a calculator and pull up your data and have a date with yourself and your business data and really look into this. And don't just look at the data, but make the conversations happen after just looking at the numbers. What do they mean? What do they imply? What can you assume about them? What do you want to do again and repeat? And what's the result that it could provide for you next year? What needs to decrease, increase, change, eliminate, right? All of it. So that what you're plugging in at the end of the year, you can be like, holy shit, I met these goals. I changed that goal. I achieved this, right? because it was all clearly mapped out to actually happen. Okay, so do your year-end recap and your 2026 planning, and then take it a step further and have these conversations about your data, and let me know what insights came out for you or what questions you have about looking at your numbers and being like, okay, well, what the fuck does this mean and what do I actually do with it? Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sell the Damn Service. I'm really honored that you spent however many minutes you just did with me. Now, if you could go do me a very quick favor and be sure to like, subscribe, leave a rating and a review for this podcast over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or, pick your favorite platform. I'm not going to be that choosy. It truly means the world to me. It's how little tiny shows that are like mine, that are self-funded and, being edited in between dinner time and school pickup, it helps us get seen. It's free for you to do and takes just a couple of minutes. And I would love you forever if I could send you an edible arrangement as a big thank you. I would. So instead, consider this giant thank you directed just at you for going to do that. And share this episode or this podcast with a friend who needs to hear it. I love ranting and raving about service-based business strategies. And, I think more people should listen to this show, honestly. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I really, really, really am grateful that you're here, and we will chat very soon.